Now, how do you strengthen Nigeria's national identity in a country with so many sub-identities? Well, the experts say you need to have a vision that will unite all the people in that vision. And according to the National Institute for Cultural Orientation, which is the agency of the Ministry of Art, Culture and the Creative Economy that's charged with creating a national cultural identity, the way to do it is to create a unifying cultural identity, which then leads to a national identity and character. But what exactly is a cultural identity? And in a country with so many cultures and is today arguably more divided than at any time in its history, how do you forge a cultural identity on a national level that everyone will buy into? Well, for more on this, I'm joined now in the studio by the Executive Secretary and CEO of the National Institute for Cultural Orientation, Otumba Biodun Ajiboye. Thank you very much indeed for coming in. And before we start, let me say congratulations.
Thank you, Charles.
Because the last time you were here, it was a very combative, very combative discussion, because you were in the middle of elections and campaigning and all the rest of it. But you won the election, you've been given an appointment, so congratulations are in order.
Thank you very much for congratulating me, and I think I should thank the President for considering me worthy of this appointment. And talking about combat, there won't be any combat because elections are over and we're not in court. So let's discuss governance.
Okay, well, let us assess because you've been given that appointment, so let's assess your competence in that appointment. That's part of the reason you're here. Let's start by asking you, how do you define Nigerianness? I mean, does such a thing actually exist, or do people define themselves by their ethnicity in this country? Because on the face of it, Nigerianness seems to be quite amorphous and could be open to endless interpretation, couldn't it?
Interestingly, Charles, from the beginning of time, we have been a people bound together by a common interest.
When you say beginning of time, you mean beginning of the Nigerian nation?
Yes, right, in the 50s, in the 40s, when the agitation to be a country started in the 40s, up to 60s. We have been a people bound together by a common interest. We understood how to live together. It didn't matter whether a man...
Well, let me correct that. Yeah? We were forced to live together.
Well, we were forced to come under one governance, not to live together. We were living together. People were coming from the Sahel down to the south here to trade. And they were trading peacefully. The people of the old Oyo Empire were actually going up north to trade.
But they were confident in their autonomy.
Oh, fantastic!
They weren't forced into one
exactly.
country.
But when it became a government, the issue of northern and southern protectorate being merged and all of that came to being and all of that. But my point basically here is that every ethnic group in Nigeria has a respectable culture. What we missed out was not identifying these cultures and unifying these cultures as an important and integral part of governance. Was what we missed out. The Chinese, for instance, didn't miss that out. They insisted, they understood, and they stood by the fact that our culture is actually the most important. Let infuse it into policy. Let infuse it into politics. Let infuse it into governance. We can see what they have achieved with that. Even talking about technology, the Japanese still took their culture along in the development of technology. We missed that out. And at the point that we are, our neglect of our culture had led into so many troubles for us as a nation. From corruption to banditry to kidnapping to Boko Haram to all the societal vice you can talk about is as a result of the fact that we have neglected our culture and we behaved as if we didn't have a culture.
But is it a culture in a country that is multi-ethnic with hundreds of ethnic groups speaking different languages? I mean, it must be a challenge for you even conceptualizing how you're going to forge a national cultural identity. And the question is whether there is a broad consensus on that, or whether you have a template for that.
Whether we like it or not, if it was the issue to confront, unifying the cultures and getting one cultural identity, we could have succeeded in doing it. It couldn't have been more difficult than the constitutions we have enacted over the years. People, you see, if we recognize a problem, we go about looking for how to solve the problem. My point is, our cultures are not so different. For instance, it took me a long time to know that Wahala is actually an Hausa word. Damu is actually an Hausa word. We use it in Yoruba language as if it were Yoruba. That tells you that these languages have been fused. And all we needed to do at the right time, at that time, was to see how these cultures can coalesce and come to one understanding to be our cultural identity. I can tell you for free, a nation without a cultural identity cannot have a national identity. Let me give you an instance. You see an Indian who dresses up suit like you dressed up in English dress, as you are. An Indian will have his turban, and the moment you sight him, this is an Indian.
It depends on which part of India.
Well, I wouldn't know.
If it's a Sikh, they'd wear a turban.
Fantastic. Yeah. You see a Chinese, you can identify that this is a Chinese, whether from his language, he's not struggling to speak English. Unlike you and I, that we believe that the more English you speak, the better man you are.
No, but to be fair, Otumba,
yes,
there is a measure of cultural identity in this country. I mean, the traditional clothes that you're talking, I mean, you're wearing
I'm talking about fusing it together to get one cultural identity.
But the traditional clothes that you're wearing and that many Nigerians wear sort of defines them, doesn't it? I mean, if you see someone, I mean, if I saw you somewhere, outside Nigeria or anywhere, wearing native Nigerian fashion, I would know immediately
you are a Nigerian,
that you are a Nigerian. And of course, Nigeria is also known for its food and its music and all the rest of it.
Exactly.
So there is a measure of a cultural identity.
At this point, we are talking of escalating, fusing it.
Right.
Because your predicament, trying to understand what cultural identity is we have different cultures, so many cultures. How do we fuse it to be one culture? That was the issue, that was the challenge. And I'm saying that is exactly what we should start to do now. Because if we do not get very, very comfortable with our cultural identity, to move to a national level of a national identity will be difficult.
Yeah, but before you get to the level of cultural identity, you have to be able to establish a country that is acceptable to people, that people feel they can buy into.
A country that is acceptable to people.
That is acceptable.
Is Nigeria not acceptable to Nigerians?
Acceptable to people in the sense that it provides for them, it gives them a sense of inclusion. There is no sense of alienation. There's no sense of injustice. The country actually offers to them the benefits of being a member of a country, and as such wanting to buy into that cultural
exactly
identity.
Where the problem is. I am saying, it started from the beginning of time. If from the beginning of time we recognize the fact that our culture should play an important role in policy making, should play an important role in politics, should play an important role in governance, we would have overcome this kind of challenge we are talking about. Let me give you an instance. We learned in school those days that customs and tradition are the basic sources of law. If you remember, you are a lawyer. And I understand
I'm not a lawyer, actually, although I studied law.
So fine, fantastic. So what I'm saying now is that even politics and governance, law is an important part of politics and governance. So therefore, what I'm saying is that we need to appreciate the fact that our culture should not be difficult for us to identify with. We should readily identify with our culture and then infuse it into policy making. And I cited the examples of the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Indians. Their culture plays a crucial role in their process, in the process of their policy making, in the process of their politics, and in the process of their governance. That is the point we need to get to. I was thinking, we're about to come up with an idea in my agency to say we need to get back our cultural values. The cultural values we used to have when we were kids, when somebody's father embezzled money, everybody that is a friend to his child alienates him. They run away from him for some reason, because that was not an acceptable character that anybody wanted to identify with. Today, if you steal money in government, your people will say is our thief. We can identify with him. And that is what we are talking about, erosion of our cultural value. We need to first of all try to reconnect with our cultural value. Once we have reconnected with our cultural value, a lot of things will fall in place. A lot of societal decadence will fall in place. And that's at the point that we are. It's not all about technological advancement. Even with technology, culture plays a very huge role. Culture is life. Culture is the way you have found your environment and how you relate with your environment. And that has become, for now, it has become an important part that we need to address.
Okay. So, given that your agency, which you head, is charged with giving that national identity, what are your plans? What would represent for you a great achievement in that agency?
Well, you see, I am one person who believes that every role you play should impact on the society. I have taken a cursory look at the society today. I have seen for 60 years, let's say 55 years, I've seen the way the society had gone down in terms of character, in terms of behavior, public behavior, and all of that. And it is a reflection, like I said, of the fact that we no longer have any bit of respect for what our cultural values are. My role, as it were now, with my minister, is to say, look, let us see how best we can contribute to whatever. See, because solving a societal problem can be through psychosocial mechanism, not necessarily the military approach. The military approach is a secondary approach, correctional approach. The first psychological approach is to talk to the mind of man and say this behavior is not acceptable by this society. If we're able to do that, for instance, we're trying to now infuse culture into curriculum of schools. The children must learn the importance of their culture at a young age. They grow up to appreciate these cultural values, and these cultural values will not leave them. Although society changes, but we must change with the society. We must at all times appreciate and uphold our culture as a people. If we're able to do that, our society will have some normalcy, and government will have less reason to chase after criminals. Even criminality will reduce. And that is the role religion was meant to play, as a matter of fact, in a society. But let's not put religion into it. Let's face culture, because culture is forever there. Religion comes and goes. Yesterday, we never had Pentecostal churches. You and I grew up in Orthodox churches, Anglican, Catholic, Methodist. Midway in the 70s, late 70s, the Pentecostal churches came, and so society changes. But culture remains if you nurture it. So Nigeria is at a point where we must nurture our culture to ensure that it impacts on our society.
Yes.
Through psychosocial mechanism.
Right. I'm still trying to understand how you define culture in a multicultural setting such as Nigeria, because, and even assuming you were able to come up with some form of national cultural identity, you would still need to define it to the universal understanding and agreement of Nigerians, wouldn't you?
Charles, that's exactly the point I'm making. We have never been confronted with a need to come and put a cultural identity at the fore of our national identity. We are now at that point. We need to sit down. We need to fashion out ways of harmonizing these various cultures. And you see, the cultures are similar.
But should that be a priority right now? And let me tell you why I'm asking you that question.
If it is not a priority, we will still be building skyscrapers on faulty foundations.
What I mean is this. If you create a society that is inclusive, that people feel they can participate in, that they have benefits from, that is distributing that is protecting rights, distributing resources equitably, giving people a sense of inclusion. If you create a society like that, because you're citing countries like China, you're citing Japan and so on, they built their economies. They brought their people, after they built, people felt they owned their economies. They were bestriding the global stage. When they did that, they didn't have to tell anybody to buy into that society. The people themselves were willing on their own to become eager participants in the formation of that national cultural identity, because there was something there for them. But when you have a society that is so riven with ethnic divisions, and so riven with corruption, and so riven with so many different, with leaders who have no
Charles,
care for
I am
their
your
people.
guest. You are the one speaking all the
No,
time,
I
so let me
understand
speak. I'm the one that
I'm
your
just
guest.
trying to make the point.
No, you've made the point.
So that I
You've
can
made the point,
understand
but
how what you're trying to.
My
how you're
problem,
gonna forge
my problem
this,
with
this
that point.
cultural identity.
My problem with that point is that you are assuming, rightly or wrongly, that we don't have a society, we don't have a country that is comfortable, that is convenient, that people are together. And I'm saying to you, Nigeria is only 64 years old. America is over 200 years. And I'm saying to you that this society is evolving. At the point that we are now, can we please rectify whatever we feel is wrong? I mean, I think that is just what is humanly reasonable to do.
Well, you've mentioned one way to do it,
Good.
which is through education.
Through education, which is what
Right.
which is part of what we are trying to do. So my point is, I do not see Nigeria as being irreparable. I do not see.
Nobody says it's
No, I'm
irreparable.
coming. I do not see Nigeria as having a kind of problem that we cannot confront. We are having a problem in this society, and we are coming to the public to say one of the problems we have, or one of the ways to solve the problem of this society, is go back to our cultural value. Begin to preach our cultural value as a people. You now confronted me with another issue to say, how do we unify various cultures? And I said to you, that is the challenge we must face. Intellectuals will sit together, cultural experts will sit together, behavioral experts will sit together, politicians will sit together. We take them from every part of Nigeria, professors of sociology, professors, and we say,
So
look,
what steps are you taking in
we're
that
already
direction?
working on that.
Right.
And that's why I said one of the simplest ways to address this problem is to incorporate culture into curriculum of schools, so that from the young age, people are meant to see what the value of this society, cultural value of this society is. After we have been able to do that, say for instance, with primary school, even in secondary school, we upgrade that cultural interest into maybe civics, and all of that. University, we upgrade it again, but it will be a continuum in such a way that the man knows that his culture is most important before anything else. Once we are able to achieve that, we will build a new breed of citizenry.
Right. And do you forge that national cultural identity before you forge a national identity?
It is the basis. It is the basis. Cultural identity is to first of all recognize yourself. National identity will now be, what is my role as a citizen of a country?
Right.
It is when you have realized what your cultural interest, what your cultural being is, then you now say, okay, in spite of this, my cultural understanding of myself, I must transfer it to how to relate as a citizen of Nigeria. That is where nationalism comes, patriotism comes. And from there, then you now see that a man will get to the civil service and will not have any urge to steal money. A man becomes a policeman and taking bribe will be too difficult for him. You understand what I'm saying? So rectifying the vices of this society must come first of all from the view of cultural uprightness. We need to get the cultural value back, and we are planning to mount a serious campaign on bring back our cultural value.
Okay.
In those days, you see an elderly man, you don't even look at him eyeball to eyeball. Whether you are Igbo, whether you are Hausa, whether you are Yoruba, that culture of respect was universal within the Nigerian context. That is one unification that you are talking about. Now, there's something we call Omoluabi in Yoruba. Omoluabi is epitome of good character. That exists in Igbo, it exists in Hausa. We need to just find those nexus and connect them and build a typical Nigerian character. Once we get that Nigerian character, then we will begin to solve some of these problems without actually resulting to a lot of defense budgets.
Well, I have to say that I am I'm actually impressed with the enthusiasm you have for your job and for the role that you have to play. And please come back and talk to us again.
Thank you very much.
As you make progress. Otumba Biodun Ajiboye is the Executive Secretary and CEO of the National Institute for Cultural Orientation. Thank you very much indeed.
My pleasure, Charles. I'll always come around.
That's it for this edition of Arise Prime Time. Join us again tomorrow from me and the entire team here in Abuja and Enugu. Bye-bye, and thank you for watching.